Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Look, if you think that game could be spoiled by a couple screenshots, really?
So I did a lot of complaining about this game, so I thought I'd propose some solutions to the story, its gameplay and other features. I made a list of 7 things that I could drastically improve in The Last of Us Part 2 in my opinion, and maybe you guys can leave some suggestions in the comment sections below for things you would have seen differently in the game as well. Firstly, if you haven't seen my review of the game, you'll know how disappointed I was in the way the clickers were handled. They were never really scary, they never really posed a real threat to the player, and they were basically the same as they were in the first game. There were additions like the bloaters and some cool boss battles, but there just wasn't enough in this game at all, especially considering its length. I would have had each area present a new difficulty for facing the infected. You travel to a few different areas and even some different states in the game. This could have been a golden opportunity to have each horde of the infected behave differently than the Lost. You could have had one area where the enemies move faster than the regular ones. They could have been much more agile, maybe able to run up walls, take less shots and less hits to the body, but maybe able to leap at you and throw a lot more attacks at once. And then you could have had another area where the enemies were much bigger but slower, able to take way more shots and hits, dealing much more damage to you as the player, but unable to move as quickly towards the player as well. I would have liked to have seen some more outlandish designs, maybe some new mutations where they can duplicate themselves and split off if you use certain attacks, so they'd force you to find new ways to win. I don't want to give out all of my ideas, but I've already thought of 5 other ways they could have designed the infected to keep it fresh. It seems like a missed opportunity to me and a lazy one at that. They could have done much better than what they did. There just wasn't enough variety in the zombies or the infected or whatever you want to call them. There wasn't enough going on and they just weren't hard to deal with at all. Next up, the combat was just way too one-dimensional. As I said before, I understand that the game is a cinematic piece, so they probably wanted to keep it as simple as possible and not convolute the battle mechanics. Square, square, square all day and then L1 and that is it. That is as far as it went. It starts off feeling good because it's quite heavy and it feels brutal, but there's nothing else going on to make it ever feel like it's worth playing for too long. It's just square, square, square all day. You could have made it so you can target different body parts or limbs to stun the enemy in different ways. For example, instead of just beating the shit out of a human enemy and punching them in the face constantly, you could kick them in the shins to put them on one knee and then put them in a headlock maybe to use them as a human shield. Now you can use human shields in the game, that is 100% a thing, but it's only via a stealth approach. You could have broken arms to leave them unable to use the gun whilst you move on to another enemy that's posing danger to you. Again, there's so many ways you could have done this that would have made it a bit more fun to play through the game. There are 0 puzzles or any times in this game where you have to employ real strategy. You go from beginning to end doing the exact same thing over and over again, and at no point was I forced to stop and think. The first time you use stealth to get around a group of people is exactly the same way you're going to use it throughout the entire game. Now whether this be for an overwhelming amount of infected or human players or just basic terrain traversing, there was nothing in this game that made me stop and think about ways I should try to use mechanics differently. It was just stealth and shooting, no variations at all. That's it. There were no layers to this game at all. It's like they didn't even try, and you'd think coming off the back of one of the best games of all time, it would be a chance to really build up something special and differentiate it from the first. Now that's some basic gameplay changes, but I understand that the majority of people didn't really have an issue with the gameplay, so that's neither here nor there. The story is really what divided players from critics, so here's a few suggestions I have to make the story a more enjoyable experience. I would have only had you play as Ellie and Joel. I would not have had you play as Abby. Having you play as Joel's killer is absolutely criminal. It is war crimes as far as I'm concerned, and I did not appreciate it at all, and I think most people didn't appreciate it. Not even a little bit. I don't think anyone liked that decision. The problem with this change is you'd have to restructure most of the game, but I think that would be favourable since most people did not enjoy playing as Abby. I think you played as Abby for around 10 hours and that felt like way too much. That felt like such an unbelievable drag to me because I hate the character, that I'm sure you could repurpose a lot of her gameplay and a lot of her better moments in the set piece action and restructure the entire story for the better. The reason that we didn't need to play as her is because the point of feeling sorry for her comes off as forced and fake. It's completely lost on the player. I don't even feel sorry for this character one little bit. Not even once. Not a tiny bit. You'd have to completely rewrite everything about her for that to work. Her story is not one of sympathy. She is well and truly the villain in this game. There's no two ways about that. From the moment you're introduced to this character, she appears unhinged and angry. I understand her anger, but they did not convey it in a good way. She doesn't seem capable of redemption in the slightest. To do this, you need to rewrite Joel's death scene and the lead up to his death. I understand that killing Joel is where this game wants to go, so let's just stick with that narrative for now. Firstly, don't have you playing as Abby to be saved by Joel. This sucked knowing what was going to follow. Have the player play as Joel and hear the commotion. Have that commotion being caused by the infected chasing Abby to have another horde head towards Joel and Tommy. Have Joel and Tommy fight through that horde to get to Abby and then save her. Whilst this is happening, you are still playing as Joel. This is where the entire death sequence would have to completely be altered. I would have had Abby's group be in close proximity to the hordes chasing Abby. I would have them run to Abby and Joel's aid. In this confusion and panic, have Tommy call out to Joel. Obviously he can't say a fake name when there's all these zombies around you and you need to get Joel's attention to save his life potentially. So Abby would hear this and it would suddenly click to her who this guy is. But she's too overrun by the infected to do anything. Joel and Tommy continue to fight alongside Abby's group. Joel saves Abby multiple times and tells her to stay close to him. Joel continues to save Abby and even assists in saving Owen, who we know is one of Abby's love interests. They begin running from the infected as a group only to be cornered in a barn. Maybe use the same barn they killed Joel in. The barn becomes overwhelmed by the infected. Some of Abby's group are dragged off and eaten, but no characters that are important to the story. These are just cannon fodder from her community. At this time, Joel makes an opening to escape, but there's just too many of them for him and Owen to get out alive. Abby, seeing that they both won't make it, hesitates, but shoots Joel in the leg, knowing that it was a wrong thing to do, but also knowing that this man killed her father and it would be the only way for Owen to escape. So Owen, using the opportunity that Abby created for him, gets away whilst Joel gets swarmed by the infected. This all happened next to a wall that has collapsed now, by the way, so the barn is open. It's open for people to see on the outside. Hearing the commotion from afar, Ellie has also made her way to where the noise is and has witnessed Abby shooting Joel in the leg and using him as bait for Owen to get away. What Ellie couldn't see is that Abby feels remorseful for what she's about to do and understands that even though she has created an opening for Owen to get away, she knows that what she's done is wrong and she knows that it's her father's killer, but she also feels a bit of regret knowing that Joel has saved her life a few times since the horde have chased her down. Tommy, having witnessed her shoot Joel in the leg, also runs to Joel's aid but is overrun and they're both eaten by the infected whilst Ellie has to watch and escape herself. Ellie never saw Abby's tears or the lead up to this, so now revenge is on her mind for what's happened to Joel and Tommy. Abby now becomes a more redeemable character, and guess what? I came up with that on the spot. I shit you not, and I swear on my life. I actually came up with that on the spot just now, and it's probably still not the best way to bring about the end of Joel. It's not really thought out, but it would have made a much better story overall, at least a much better death scene for Joel than what we got. You might not have even been as bothered playing as Abby as you would have when you played the game. Maybe you can feel sympathy for her actions. Her entire arc would have to be retold obviously, but you get my point. If I can think of this on the spot, and I totally believe that my version is better than Naughty Dog's, then why couldn't they think of anything better? Now lastly, I would have changed the ending. The ending has unanimously been agreed to be absolute dog shit. This ending from both a gameplay standpoint and a storytelling aspect are both terrible. If Abby was a redeemable character, then letting her live would have been okay, but she's not. The entire sequence at this ending sucks. Let's go with the original plot here, but alter the ending. You have this entire stronghold of fake fireflies and the infected. You could have used this entire island as a final battle. Abby and Ellie fight through it, killing other enemies to get to each other, having the horde overrun the stronghold, having it go all up in flames to have Abby and Ellie fight alongside each other to make their way through the fire and through the collapsing building around them. You could have had an amazing set piece moment here. You could have combined the gunfight with a fist fight. You could have had them work together, force their way through the stronghold and the infected to eventually get to each other to have a showdown. On top of all of this though, Abby did not deserve to live. Ellie should have killed Abby in the end. It's that plain and simple. The game was about revenge, and in the end, there was no revenge to be had. None. It was an absolute shambles. After all of the shit you go through with Ellie, there's no reward for the player. Again, all of this stuff I thought of on the spot in the morning, and I just started talking into the mic. This isn't really rehearsed. It's not really thought out. I've given it no real thought, and I'm sure if I did, I could have made a much better story than Naughty Dog did for The Last of Us Part 2. But what do you guys think? Did you enjoy the story as it was, or would you have changed things around around as well. If you would change things around, let me know what you would change. Let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, guys, and I will catch you next time. Peace.